They did not just bring another woman into the house, they threw a party for it. In the same compound where Bolanle had cooked his meals for 6 years, washed his white shirts until her knuckles bled, and prayed every night for the marriage to work, her husband Femi stood in a borrowed agbada and put a ring on another woman's finger while music played and his mother clapped like she had finally won a war. Bolanle was not given a chair. She stood by the kitchen door holding her baby girl against her chest, watching the man she loved marry someone else because her womb had refused to give him a son. The new wife danced past her and whispered, "Move, you are blocking the light." That was the day Bolanle learnt that humiliation could wear asoebi and smile for pictures. If you are new here, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and watch to the very end, because this story will break you and heal you. Comment where you are listening from right now so I can see my family across the world, and tell me what you would have done if you were Bolanle that day. This is not where it started. 3 years before that party, Bolanle met Femi at a fabric shop in Yaba, Lagos. She was 24, a fashion designer who could turn 3 yards of Ankara into something women stopped to admire. She shared a one-room apartment and sewed late under a yellow bulb. Femi was 30, a loan officer at a bank in Ikeja, with clean shoes and a soft laugh that made you believe he was safe. He came to sew a native for his mother's birthday and stayed to watch her hands. He said he had never seen a woman so focused. They dated like proper Lagos people. He bought her small chops. She made him kaftans. He met her mother in Ibadan and knelt. She met his mother, Mama Femi, in Surulere, and the woman looked at her hips and said, "This one will give us strong sons." Bolanle laughed. It was not a joke. They married within a year. The wedding was small but joyful. Bolanle moved into the boys' quarters behind the family house because Femi said they would save for a flat in Lekki. She turned it into a home. She put curtains on the windows. She planted scent leaf by the door. She woke at 4 to sew before going to Yaba. Femi was proud. His friends called her sharp wife. Mama Femi called her my daughter in public and corrected her cooking in private. The pressure started the first month. "When are you giving us news?" Mama Femi asked every Sunday. Bolanle smiled and said, "In God's time, Ma." Femi squeezed her hand. At night, he whispered, "Let us enjoy ourselves first." Lagos builds and breaks people. Femi got promoted. Money came. With money came new friends. Mama Femi invited pastors to pray for male children. She bought Bolanle bitter herbs from Oshodi. She told her to stop wearing trousers because trousers blocked the womb. Bolanle endured because she loved her husband and because women in her family endured. When she finally took in the house, celebrated like Femi had been made director. Mama Femi cooked jollof for the neighbors. Femi bought a small car and said it was for the baby. Bolanle cried and stitched tiny clothes in blue because everyone said first sons brought honor. She did not know she was sewing for a war. The pregnancy was hard. She vomited until her ribs hurt. She still sewed because they needed money. Femi started coming home late. He said work was heavy. Mama Femi said a pregnant woman must not stress a man. Bolanle kept quiet and rubbed shea butter on her belly, whispering, "Please come and let us have peace." Teniola was born on a Tuesday in October at Island Maternity. She came out screaming with a full head of hair and eyes that looked too knowing. The nurse placed her on Bolanle's chest and said, "Congratulations, Mama. You have a beautiful girl." Bolanle wept and thanked God. Femi came 3 hours late with wilting flowers. He looked at the baby, looked at Bolanle, and said nothing. Mama Femi did not come. She sent a message. Tell her we were expecting good news. That was the first crack. At the naming, they called her Teniola, meaning follow wealth, because Bolanle's mother insisted a child is wealth. Mama Femi hissed and said, "Teniola or not, we still need a boy in this house." People laughed awkwardly. Bolanle held her baby tighter. Hell came like slow poison. Femi stopped touching Bolanle. He stopped giving full housekeeping money. He said the economy was bad. Mama Femi called Teniola that girl. She said, "That girl cries too much, like her mother. Carry that girl from my parlor. She brings bad luck." When Bolanle defended her, Mama Femi said, "I have raised 4 sons. Do not teach me." Bolanle fought by working harder. She took more orders. She finished dresses at midnight, breastfed, and was up by 5 to make breakfast. She thought if she proved her worth, they would soften. They did not. After Teniola turned 1, Femi changed. He followed a prophet who said his destiny needed a male heir. One night, he told Bolanle plainly, "I need a son. My name cannot die here." Bolanle said, "Then let us try again. God gives children." Femi shook his head. "I cannot wait for God to gamble with my future. I will marry a second wife." She thought he was joking until Mama Femi cleared the second room, until Femi brought home Ronke, a cream marketer from Egbeda, who called Mama Femi mommy and looked at Bolanle like a maid. The day he told her officially, she was ironing his shirt. He sat on their bed and said it like office news. "I have found someone. She understands what is at stake. You will remain my wife. She will give us the son." Bolanle's hands shook and burnt a hole through the collar. She did not shout. She asked only, "What did I do wrong by giving you a daughter?" He had no answer. The wedding was in the compound on a Saturday, with canopies and a DJ. Mama Femi danced in gold lace. Ronke wore white and red. Femi wore the agbada Bolanle had sewn. Bolanle was told to help in the kitchen. She stood in an old Ankara Tiniola strapped to her back, watching her life end with applause. Auntie Carol, the neighbor who sold drinks at the gate, saw her tears. She squeezed her shoulder and whispered, "Endure, my daughter, God sees." Bolanle nodded because she had no strength left to speak. But inside her chest, something had begun to form. Not anger yet, just the quiet decision that she would not die in this house. Life with 2 wives is a special hell. Ronke did not cook or clean. She ordered Bolanle around. Mama Femi backed her. If Bolanle complained, Femi said, "You are the senior wife, act like it." If she kept quiet, they called her proud. Every morning, Bolanle swept the compound while Ronke slept in. Every night she washed plates while Ronke painted her nails and laughed on the phone. The disrespect was daily, deliberate, designed to break her spirit. Teniola was 2 and understood too much. She hid behind the sewing machine when Ronke mocked her. One evening, Ronke said before visitors, "This child is too dark. She cannot represent this family in pictures." Bolanle carried Teniola inside and cried into her hair. That night, Teniola wiped her mother's tears with her tiny palm and said, "Mommy, don't cry. I fine." Bolanle broke completely. Her brother Dele came from Ibadan and told Femi, "You are killing my sister." Femi said, "I am expanding my family." Dele told Bolanle to leave. She said, "Where will I go with a child and no money?" He left 5,000 naira and he promised. Bolanle's business failed because she had no peace. Customers complained. Femi refused to pay Teniola's school fees at 3. He said, "Ronke is pregnant. We must focus." Ronke got pregnant in 4 months and the house celebrated again. Mama Femi bought a goat. Femi rented a hall for the gender reveal. It was a boy. That night, Bolanle packed a small bag. She did not leave. Teniola had fever and called daddy in her sleep. Ronke gave birth to a boy they named King David. The house changed. Femi bought a new car. Mama Femi slept in Ronke's room to help with the baby. Bolanle and Teniola were moved from the quarters to the store by the generator because it needed to be renovated for a nanny. The store had no window. It smelled of fuel. Teniola developed a cough. Still, Bolanle endured. She told herself, "My daughter needs a father, even a foolish one." She told Teniola stories to cover the generator sound. She taught her to read with old newspapers. Teniola was brilliant. At 4, she could spell her name and count to 100. At 4 and a half, she asked, "Mommy, why does grandma hate me?" Bolanle said, "Because some people do not know how to love what they did not expect." Teniola nodded like she understood, and from then on she stopped running to her grandmother for anything. She ran only to books. In that store, under the buzzing generator, Bolanle would read proverbs aloud while Teniola repeated each line, her voice steady. Those nights built something in the girl that no insult could touch, a fire that would become her strength. The final betrayal came from Femi's greed. He had been taking loans at the bank with fake documents. He used Bolanle's name and BVN to open an account because her ID was clean. He told her it was for a cooperative. She signed because she trusted him. He collected 3 million naira. When the loan went bad and the bank investigated, Femi panicked. Mama Femi told him to clean his name. Ronke said the senior wife was bad luck. They needed a sacrifice. They accused Bolanle of stealing Ronke's gold and trying to harm baby David with juju. Mama Femi swore she saw Bolanle sprinkle powder near the court. Ronke cried over a missing earring. Femi did not ask questions. He stood in the parlor and said, "I have tolerated you enough. You and your daughter bring curse to my house." Bolanle knelt on the cold tiles. She said, "Femi, you know me. I have never stolen. I have never wished evil on a child. Look at Teniola. She is your blood." Femi looked away. Mama Femi pointed at Teniola and said the words that broke Bolanle forever. "Take this worthless girl and leave my son's house before she infects my grandson with her failure." Ronke smirked. Neighbors gathered. Auntie Caro tried to intervene. Femi pushed her aside. He told Bolanle to pack before sunset. Bolanle packed in 20 minutes. One Ghana must go bag, her sewing machine head, Teniola's birth certificate, and a small Bible. Teniola held her scrap fabric doll and watched her father carry their mattress out like trash. It was raining when they left, that Lagos drizzle that makes everywhere sad. Teniola wore a yellow raincoat too big. Bolanle carried the bag on her head and held her daughter's hand. At the gate, Teniola stopped and turned back. She looked at her father under the veranda beside his mother and his new wife and his son. She said in a clear voice, "Daddy, I will come back." Femi laughed, a short, cruel laugh. He said, "Come back and do what? Go with your mother." Bolanle did not look back. If she did, she would turn to salt. She walked into the street with her child, with no house, no husband, no money, and a debt in her name she did not know yet. Behind her, the gate shut with a clang that sounded final. Auntie Caro ran after them with an umbrella and 2,000 naira. She pressed it into Bolanle's hand and said, "Go to my sister in Mushin. She has a room." They boarded a danfo at the junction. Teniola pressed her face to the window, watching the house disappear. She did not cry. She held her mother's hand tighter and whispered, "Mommy, I will come back." Bolanle pulled her close, kissed her forehead, and made a promise to the God who sees. She said, "We will survive, we will rise, and the day we return, it will not be to beg." The bus drove into Lagos traffic, into the unknown, into the beginning of a different life. In the back seat, a 4-year-old girl they called Worthless stared at the city and memorized every pain, every face, every word, storing them like evidence for a future courtroom she did not yet understand. 15 years later, that same gate would open for her again, but the man who threw her out would not be laughing. They thought throwing us out would bury us. They did not know they planted us. Mushin did not welcome Bolanle with soft hands. It welcomed her with noise, with generators that never slept, with a single room that smelled of kerosene and other people's sweat. Mama Iyabu, Auntie Caro's elder sister, gave them the back room for 3,000 naira a month and one rule: no crying after 10 because her husband worked early. Bolanle paid the first month with the 2,000 naira Caro gave her and the last 1,000 she borrowed from a woman at the bus stop. That night, she spread a wrapper on the floor, laid Teniola beside her, and stared at the ceiling where cockroaches ran races. Teniola did not complain. At 4 years old, she learned how to fetch water from the shared tap without spilling. She learned to greet every elder with "Good morning, ma," "Good morning, sir." She learned to sit quietly while her mother pedaled the old sewing machine head that Bolanle had balanced on a wooden plank. The machine sounded like a tired heart, but it brought small money. Bolanle started again from zero. She told the women in the compound she could sew. She made school uniforms for 50 naira profit. She amended trousers. She turned old lace into church blouses. Some customers paid late. Some did not pay. She still sewed. At night when Teniola slept, Bolanle would press her palm to her chest and pray the same prayer. God, let my daughter not inherit my shame. The shame found them anyway. 6 months after they left Surulere, a letter came from a microfinance bank. It was addressed to Bolanle Adegoke. It said she owed 3,214,000 naira, with interest growing daily. It said legal action would commence in 14 days. Bolanle's hands shook so hard the paper tore. She had never borrowed 3 million in her life. She remembered signing a paper Femi brought home. It said it was for a cooperative that would help her buy a better machine. She had signed because she trusted her husband. She had signed her own prison. She went to the bank in Yaba with Teniola holding her hand. The manager, a tired man with glasses, showed her the form. Her signature was there. Her BVN was there. Her passport photo was there. He said, "Madam, this is fraud, but on paper it is you." Bolanle begged. She explained. The man said, "Bring your husband." She laughed, a broken sound. She had no husband. That week, bailiffs came to Mushin. They did not take much because there was nothing to take. They took the wooden plank table. They took the small standing fan. Mama Iyabo shouted at Bolanle to leave before they brought trouble to her house. Auntie Caro came and knelt and begged Mama Iyabo. She said, "Let them stay. God will pay you back." Teniola watched everything. She watched her mother kneel before strangers. She watched men write inventory of their poverty. She did not cry. She memorized the bank's name, the manager's face, the words joint liability. That night she asked, "Mommy, why did Daddy do this?" Bolanle had no good answer, so she told the truth. Because he's a coward. Because he thought a woman would stay quiet. Something shifted in Teniola that night. She stopped being just a child. She became a witness. And witnesses do not forget anything. School saved her. At 5, Mama Iyabo helped enroll her in the local public primary school because Bolanle could not afford private. The head teacher, Mrs. Bisi, noticed the girl in the faded uniform who always sat in front. Teniola could read before the others could spell. She could add numbers faster than the teacher could write them. Mrs. Bisi called Bolanle and said, "This child is not ordinary. Do not let Mushin swallow her." Bolanle worked like a mad woman to keep her in school. She sewed from 4 in the morning till midnight. Her eyes grew red. Her back bent. She refused to let Teniola hawk on the street like other children. She said, "Your job is your book. Leave the suffering to me." Teniola kept her promise. She came first in every class. At 9, she won a local essay competition with a piece titled "My Mother's Hands." She wrote, "My mother's hands are rough, but they built a house inside a room." The judges cried. The prize was 20,000 naira and a scholarship form to a better secondary school in Surulere. The irony was not lost on Bolanle. Surulere, where they were thrown out, was where her daughter would return to learn. The scholarship was partial. Bolanle still had to find money for books, for transport, for exam fees. She took extra jobs. She sold asoebi for noisy weddings and did not sleep for 3 days straight. Once she fainted at the machine. Teniola found her on the floor and screamed. A neighbor poured water on her face. When Bolanle opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was her daughter's terrified face. She pulled her close and whispered, "We will not die here." Teniola started tutoring younger children after school for 200 naira per hour. She saved every kobo in a small tin. She bought her mother painkillers. She bought herself second-hand textbooks. She learned early that waiting for rescue was a waste of time. She also learned to hide her pain behind perfect scores. Teachers praised her brilliance, but none saw the nights she stayed awake, listening to her mother cough from generator fumes, promising herself that one day she would buy a house with clean air and quiet walls. Meanwhile, in Surulere, the house that threw them out was cracking. Femi's luck did not last. The bank audit that started with the 3 million loan grew bigger. Investigators found more fake accounts, more forged signatures, more money moved to buy land in Ronke's name. Femi was suspended quietly. He told his family it was a leave. Mama Femi believed him. Ronke changed after she gave birth. She wanted a big life. She opened a shop with Femi's money and closed it in 6 months. She started traveling to Dubai to buy hair. She came back with more luggage than profit. She fought with Mama Femi over control of the kitchen. The house that once clapped for her became a battlefield of two women who both wanted to be queen. King David, their precious son, grew into a boy who knew he was the heir. At 8, he refused to greet elders. At 10, he was caught stealing phones at school. At 12, he was expelled for fighting a teacher. Femi beat him. Ronke defended him. Mama Femi blamed evil spirits. No one blamed bad parenting. The money started slipping. Femi sold the second car. Then he borrowed against the family house. Then the bank called his loan. The same bank that once praised him now sent him letters with red stamps. The same microfinance that hounded Bolanle had been quietly bought by a bigger bank, and the file with her name was transferred. Teniola did not know any of this yet. She was busy becoming dangerous in the best way. She passed WAEC with 7 A's and 2 B's. She gained admission to study law at the University of Lagos on a full scholarship from a women's foundation that read her essay. On the day the admission letter came, Bolanle locked the door of their one room, held the paper to her chest, and wept for 1 hour straight. Teniola held her and said, "Mommy, you will never sew for survival again. I promise." University was another war. Teniola had no laptop. She wrote notes by hand and borrowed books from the library. She joined the legal aid clinic in year 2. There she met Mr. Akin, a senior advocate in his 60s who had seen everything. He saw how she argued, how she listened, how she never raised her voice but made people shift in their seats. He took her under his wing. He said, "Law is not about shouting. It is about evidence. It is about patience. You have both." In her 3rd year, the clinic assigned her to help women facing debt harassment. She sat across from market women who had signed papers they did not understand. She saw her mother's story in every face. One afternoon, a file landed on her desk from the archives. It was a bad debt portfolio from 2011. She opened it to practice drafting a defense. The name on the first page froze her blood. Bolanle Adegoke, amount outstanding 3,214,000. Co-signer Femi Adegoke. Status dormant. Transferred. Teniola's hands went cold. She read every page. She saw the forged BVN linkage. She saw the signature that matched her mother's careful slant but was dated on a day Bolanle was in the hospital giving birth to her. She saw the internal memo that said staff involved suspended pending investigation. The staff name was Femi Adegoke. She closed the file and walked out of the library into the rain. She did not cry. She stood under the water and let it wash her face. For 15 years, she had carried a child's memory of being called worthless. Now she held a man's crime in her hands. She took the file to Mr. Akin. He read it slowly. removed his glasses, and said, "This is not just a death case. This is identity theft, forgery, and bank fraud. If your mother had been a man with connections, this would have been cleared years ago." He looked at her and asked, "What do you want to do?" Teniola answered without blinking, "I want to clear my mother's name, and I want the man who did this to answer for it." Mr. Akin nodded. He said, "Then you must become the kind of lawyer they cannot ignore. Finish your degree. Come work with me. We will build the case quietly." Teniola graduated top of her class. She was called to the Nigerian bar at 23. Bolanle sewed her own aso-ebi for the ceremony, a simple blue lace she had saved for 3 years to buy. When Teniola wore her wig and gown and hugged her mother, the photographers at the hall did not know they were photographing a revenge, 15 years in the making. She joined Akin and Co. in Victoria Island. Within 2 years, she won 3 high-profile cases for women defrauded by loan sharks. Newspapers called her the people's advocate. She was invited to speak on TV about financial abuse in marriage. She never mentioned her father, not yet. At night, she would open an old notebook where she had written every insult from childhood, every name they called her mother, every date. She turned pain into preparation. She studied land law, banking regulations, and forgery statutes until she could recite them like psalms, knowing the day would come when memory would need proof. During that time, Femi's world collapsed completely. The bank finally filed charges. The house in Surulere was placed under a court order. Ronke left with King David to stay with her sister in Ibadan after a fight where she accused Femi of ruining her life. Mama Femi suffered a mild stroke and could no longer shout, only whisper. Femi, now 52, was selling his watches to pay lawyers. He heard about a young female lawyer who was beating banks in court. He saw her picture in the newspaper. He did not recognize the girl in the wig. The caption read, "Teniola Adegoke wins landmark judgment for single mothers." He read the surname and felt a strange chill, but told himself Adegoke is common. One Tuesday morning, a letter was delivered to Akin and Co. It was a brief from the Asset Management Corporation. They wanted the firm to lead the recovery and prosecution of a legacy fraud case involving a former bank staff. The file number matched the old microfinance debt. The lead defendant was listed as Femi Adegoke. Mr. Akin placed the file on Teniola's desk. He did not say anything. He just watched her. Teniola opened it. She saw her father's passport photo from 15 years ago, younger, smiling. She saw her mother's forged signature. She saw the address of the house she was thrown out of. She saw the amount with interest, now over 12 million. Her phone buzzed. It was Bolanle. She said, "Tenny, are you coming home for dinner? I made effort." Teniola smiled and said, "Yes, mommy, I will be home soon." She closed the file, stood up, straightened her blazer, and looked out at the Lagos skyline. The little girl in the yellow raincoat, who promised to come back, was now a woman with the law in her hand. Tomorrow morning, she would walk into the Federal High Court and file the first motion. And for the first time since that rainy day at the gates, Femi Adegoke would hear his daughter's name spoken in a place where he could not laugh it away. The first time Femi Adegoke saw his daughter again, she was wearing a black robe and calling his name for the record. Federal High Court, Ikoyi, Courtroom 4. The air conditioner hummed like a tired prayer. Teniola Adegoke stood at the front table, her wig perfectly set, her voice steady. She said, "May it please this honorable court, for the claimant, I appear with Mr. Akin, San. The matter is Amcon versus Femi Adegoke and 2 others." Femi, sitting at the dock in a brown kaftan that hung loose on his shrunken shoulders, looked up and frowned. He had seen her face in the newspaper, but he did not connect it to the child in the yellow raincoat. He whispered to his lawyer, "Who is she?" His lawyer shrugged. Bolanle was not in court that morning. Teniola had begged her to stay home. She said, "Mommy, You have already testified with your life. Let me speak with the law today. Bolanle sat in their small flat in Yaba, holding her rosary, listening to a small radio. Auntie Carol sat beside her, holding her hand. Mrs. Bisi, now retired, had called to say she was watching the live stream from her phone. Mr. Akin opened with the facts. He laid out the loan from 2011, 3 million naira taken in Bolanle Adegoke's name, BVN linked without consent, signature forged, funds diverted to accounts controlled by the defendant, then used to purchase land in Egbeda in the name of his second wife. He tendered documents one by one. The judge, Justice Okafor, a woman with sharp eyes, marked each exhibit. When it was Teniola's turn, the room shifted. She did not raise her voice. She walked the court through the dates. She showed the hospital record from Island Maternity dated the 12th of October 2011. Time of birth 2:14 a.m. She showed the loan form dated the 12th of October 2011. Timestamp 9:03 a.m. With a signature purportedly of a woman who was in a postnatal ward bleeding and holding a newborn. She showed the handwriting analysis. She showed the internal memo from the bank suspending Femi Adegoke for irregularities. Femi's lawyer stood and said, "My lord, this is a civil recovery, not a forgery trial." Teniola answered, "My lord, fraud vitiates everything. You cannot recover on a crime." The judge nodded. Then Teniola called her first witness, Bolanle Adegoke. The doors opened and Bolanle walked in. She wore a simple navy blue iro and buba, her hair in a low bun, no makeup. She looked small, but she walked straight. The entire gallery went quiet. Femi stared. For a second his mouth opened. 15 years had carved lines around Bolanle's eyes, but her dignity was intact. Teniola led her gently. She asked, "Ma, do you know the defendant?" Bolanle looked at Femi for the first time in 15 years and said, "Yes, he was my husband." She asked, "Did you apply for a loan of 3 million in 2011? Bolanle said, "No." She asked, "Did you sign this form?" Bolanle looked at the paper and said, "That looks like my name, but I did not sign it. I was in the hospital giving birth to our daughter. I only signed what he told me was for a cooperative." Femi's lawyer tried to shake her. He asked, "Madam, are you not bitter because your husband married another wife?" Bolanle did not flinch. She said, "I was in pain then. I am not bitter now. I am here to tell the truth, so my daughter will not carry a debt that is not hers." She said it simply, and the court believed her because truth does not need perfume. Next, Teniola called an unexpected witness, Ronke Adegoke. A gasp moved through the room. Ronke walked in wearing a plain black dress, no jewelry, her face tired. She had left Femi 6 months earlier, after he could no longer fund her trips. King David was in Ibadan with her sister, now 17, and already in trouble with police for theft. Ronke had been offered immunity for her testimony. Teniola asked her, "Did you know about the loan?" Ronke looked down and said, "Yes. Femi told me he used his first wife's name because her record was clean. He said women don't fight back." The gallery murmured. The judge banged her gavel once. Ronke continued, "He bought the land in my name to hide it. He told me if anything happened, I should say Bolanle begged him for money. I lied for years. I am tired of lying." Femi stood up and shouted, "You ungrateful woman." The court orderly made him sit. Then the doors opened again, and a wheelchair was pushed in. Mama Femi. She was thinner, her left hand cold, her voice a whisper after the stroke. Teniola had subpoenaed her as a hostile witness, but she did not need to ask much. Mama Femi looked at Bolanle, and tears ran down her cheeks. In a broken voice, she said, "I called your child worthless. God has shown me I was the worthless one. Forgive me." Bolanle stood and walked to her. She knelt beside the wheelchair, took the old woman's hand, and said, "I forgave you the day I left your house. I had to, so my heart would not poison my child. The cameras caught it. The country watched a woman. They threw out nail to lift the woman who threw her. Femi broke. He put his head in his hands and wept. Not the tears of a man sorry for his crime, but the tears of a man who finally understood the weight of what he had lost. Teniola gave her closing address. She did not insult her father. She spoke about the law. She spoke about women who sign papers they do not understand because they trust the men who share their bed. She spoke about daughters who grew up carrying debts they did not make. She asked the court for three things. 1. A declaration that Bolanle Adegoke was a victim of identity theft and bore no liability. 2. A criminal referral for forgery and fraud against Femi Adegoke. 3. An order for restitution and the auction of his assets to repay the debt. Justice Okafor retired for 30 minutes. When she returned, the court stood. She spoke clearly. She granted all three prayers. She said, "This court has seen a pattern of financial abuse masked as culture. The law will not bless it." She cleared Bolanle's name in open court and ordered her credit record corrected immediately. She referred Femi's case to the EFCC for prosecution. She ordered the Surulere property, bought with proceeds, to be sold. The courtroom erupted in soft murmurs, not cheers, because this was not entertainment. Bolanle covered her mouth and wept quietly, not from victory, but from relief. Auntie Caro shouted, "Thank you, Jesus," from the back and was gently hushed by the orderly. Teniola stood still, her hands clasped behind her back, feeling 15 years, lift off her shoulders like a heavy wrapper, finally untied. Mr. Akin placed a hand on her shoulder and whispered, "You did it with dignity." That mattered more than the win. Outside the courtroom, reporters rushed. Femi stood alone by the pillars, his lawyer already on the phone looking for another client. He saw Teniola packing her files. He walked to her and said, "Counselor, please, you have won. Can you help me beg them?" Teniola looked at him. Up close, he was smaller than she remembered. The man who once laughed at a 4-year-old was now asking that child for mercy. She said, "Mr. Adegoke, do you remember a rainy day 15 years ago at a gate in Surulere? A little girl in a yellow raincoat said, 'Daddy, I will come back,' and you laughed." Femi's eyes widened. His lips trembled. He whispered, "Tinio, Tiniola." He reached out. She did not step back. She did not step forward. She said, "I am Teniola Adegoke, daughter of Bolanle Adegoke. I am the worthless girl your mother named. I did not come back to laugh at you. I came back so the record would show the truth." He fell to his knees right there on the marble floor. He said, "Forgive me. Tell your mother forgive me." Teniola said, "My mother forgave you long ago. That is why she is free and you are still in chains. I will not represent you. The law will. If you tell the whole truth, perhaps you will find peace." 3 months later, the auction held. The Surulere house, with its faded paint and memories, was listed. Many people came to buy because of the story. Teniola came with a bank draft. She did not buy it for revenge. She bought it because her mother deserved to choose what to do with the place that broke her. On a Saturday morning, Bolanle stood at that same gate. This time, Auntie Caro opened it for her. Mrs. Bisi was there. Mr. Akin was there. Dele, her brother, who had finally returned from Ibadan, held her elbow. Teniola placed the keys in her mother's palm and said, "Mommy, this house is yours. Do what you want with it." Bolanle walked into the compound slowly. She passed the kitchen where she once stood, while another woman married her husband. She passed the veranda where Femi laughed. She entered the parlor and sat in Mama Femi's old chair. She looked around and said, "Turn this place into a school for girls. Let no child who is called worthless ever believe it." They named it the Teniola Center for Girls. The first class had 23 students from Mushin and Surulere. On opening day, Bolanle cut the ribbon with sewing scissors. Teniola stood beside her in a simple dress. No wig, no robe. Reporters asked her how it felt to win. She said, "I did not win against my father. I won for my mother. The law did the rest." Femi was convicted 6 months later for forgery and obtained a plea deal that gave him 2 years with restitution. He wrote a letter from prison. He did not ask for money. He asked if he could see his daughter once. Teniola went with Bolanle. They sat across a table. He looked older, humbled. He said, "I wanted a son to carry my name. I did not know my name would be carried by the daughter I rejected." Teniola replied, "Names are not carried by gender. They are carried by character." Mama Femi died peacefully in her sleep, a year later, in the small room Teniola rented for her near the center. Before she died, she held Bolanle's hand and whispered, "Thank you for not leaving me to die alone." Bolanle buried her with honor, because that is who Bolanle had always been. Ronke returned once, asking for help for King David, who was in a juvenile facility. Teniola did not turn her away. She sent a lawyer from her firm to represent the boy pro bono. She told Ronke, hot people, we will break the cycle here." On the 5th anniversary of the judgment, Teniola stood in the courtyard of the center, teaching a class of 12-year-old girls about their rights. She told them, "If anyone ever calls you worthless, remember that worth is not given by men or mothers-in-law. It is built by you, one honest day at a time." One girl raised her hand and asked, "Auntie, were you scared?" Teniola smiled and said, "Every day. But I remembered my mother's hands. They were rough, but they built a house inside the room. They taught me I could build anything." The girls clapped, not for her story, but for themselves, for the futures they now believed possible inside these walls today. Bolanle watched from the doorway, her sewing machine, now in a proper workshop where she taught women tailoring for free. She no longer sewed for survival, she sewed for legacy. Later that night, Teniola walked alone through the classrooms, touching each desk like a prayer. On the blackboard in room 3, a student had written in chalk, "I am not worthless." She traced the words with her finger and felt her throat tighten. All those years in Mushin, reading by candlelight while her mother coughed, all those nights she repeated statues to herself, had led to this simple sentence on a wall. She understood then that revenge had never been the goal. The goal had always been to make the word worthless lose its power in her family forever. That evening, mother and daughter sat on the veranda of the house that once threw them out. The generator was off. The air was clean. Lagos traffic hummed far away. Bolanle leaned her head on Teniola's shoulder and said, "We survived." Teniola answered, "We rose." And in the quiet, the little girl in the yellow raincoat finally stopped memorizing pain. She had turned it into proof, into law, into a school, into a future where no daughter would ever have to come back for revenge because she would never be thrown away in the first place.